Cathy Edwards is a mobile app search pioneer with expertise in machine learning, natural language processing, and information retrieval technologies. I don't know if I understood any of those words. In 2009, she co-founded mobile app search company Chomp, the leading mobile app search engine. She created Chomp's proprietary algorithm, which understands the function of each app, allowing you to search for mobile apps based on what they do rather than what they're called. Super useful. The company has filed for 11 patents based on her app search technologies. During her tenure at Chomp, she has built the team of some top experts in search, including PhDs from MIT and UC Berkeley. And if you're going to follow Cathy on Twitter, you can follow her. It's at Cathy E, as in Cathy Edwards. Without further ado, Cathy, you are up next.
Hi everyone, how you doing? Let me just get this up here. Hi, firstly, can I just say how awesome it is to see so many women in the room. It's really great. So I've been given this kind of, I agreed with Nadia, who's the wonderful person from Women 2.0 who has kind of been our speaker liaison. She called me up about a month ago and we talked about what my speech was going to be about, and we sort of agreed to this like crazy, like, we're going to solve everyone's problems in a very short period of time. And then I sat down to write my speech a little while ago and I was like, you know what, I really can't cover all of that stuff. So what I am going to talk about is I'm going to try and keep, so one of the things that is obviously unique to me is that I'm one of the few female CTOs out there. And so I really wanted to give you guys really like a very clear, actionable product and technology kind of talk about what you guys can do, like what you guys can take away and really, you know, use when building your company. And I realize that there's a range of different technical experience in the audience. And one of the things that I just want to say as I'm going through this is don't be scared of the technology. If you're not a technical founder, that's okay. It's actually not that hard. And I think that people who code, people who program kind of have this aura of this is impossible and I couldn't possibly do this. And I'm just going to leave it, I'm going to find a really great technical co-founder and I'm just going to leave it to them. And that, if you're building a tech company, if you're building a product that is that's an app or it has a website, it kind of doesn't work well if you ignore the technology entirely. So no one's expecting you to pick up, you know, PHP and start building the entire back end. But what I wanted to give you guys was just here are a few concrete things that you can have conversations with your technical co-founders about, that you can have conversations with your engineers about, and start participating in that process. It's really important. And hopefully for those technical women in the audience, these are some helpful points as well. So what I'm definitely not going to talk about is any of the legal stuff you should do in the first 90 days. I'm not going to talk about finding a co-founder. I'm not going to talk about hiring a team because Julia just did an amazing job of that. I'm not going to talk about getting distribution for your product, and I'm really focusing on kind of technical companies here, people with technical products. All of these things are incredibly, incredibly important. So please don't ignore them, but they're not what I'm going to focus on today. So I kind of don't need to talk about this so much because Sharos just did a crazy job of introducing me, but my background is I've been in mobile my entire career. I actually started out in the research labs for Telstra, which is the big telecommunications company in Australia, which is why I have the funny accent. And gradually kind of did a bit of incubator work for them, did some prototyping of new products, and then came up to Silicon Valley because I realized that my dream was to start a company. That's what I really wanted to do. And I really didn't want to, you know, be some, you know, person from a big company who, in Australia, who comes to Silicon Valley completely green and tries to start a company without kind of understanding things. So I made it my mission to come over here and work for a couple of startups to really learn the lay of the land first. Did all my interviews over Skype. It was crazy. I'm sitting in my my bedroom at 7 a.m. in the morning in Melbourne, in Australia, doing interviews with people over here in the afternoon. I've got my pajama pants on and my shirt on top and all my makeup done nicely. And I was very, very fortunate to get a really great job. They hired me sight unseen, and I turned up here 2 days before I was to start my first job. So it's been a fantastic experience. And then in 2009, my co-founder and I started Chomp. And so I want to talk about that journey a little bit. So what I'm going to talk about is what are the 4 things you should do from a product and technology perspective in the first 90 days. And I'm really going to focus on that early stage. What should you be focusing up front? Because there's a lot of different things you could focus on. And so here are some ideas. So rule 1 is overinvest in user research. Your primary job, really, in the first 90 days is to really understand what it is that you are building. And that actually sounds kind of easy, but is actually extraordinarily difficult. So I want to tell you a little bit about how Chomp was founded and kind of maybe have that serve as a little bit of a case study. So when Ben, my co-founder, and I started Chomp, we had both been in mobile for quite a while, and we'd both been doing some work on apps and that sort of thing, and we sat down and we're like, you know what, this app store system is not going to scale. It's fundamentally broken. It's taking off, there's lots and lots of app downloads, there's lots of new apps on the market, and yet no one can actually find them. And we've got all these developer friends who are building these apps, and they don't know how to get their app found by users. And this is a huge problem. And so we knew that we wanted to build a solution around app discovery, helping users find the apps that they want, and also helping developers get their apps found. And that's kind of all we knew. We knew the market problem that we wanted to solve, and we could have written 100 ideas on a whiteboard as to what the actual solution to that problem was. You know, we talked about having a whole social experience where you were recommending your apps to your friends. We were talking about a whole, I'm going way too slow, I've just been told. A whole recommendation system, etc. And what we did was we sat down with users off Craigslist, and we just asked them a whole bunch of questions about how they were finding apps right now. And that was incredibly important. A lot of people, when they think about user research, think about usability testing. So you've built a product and now you're seeing whether people can actually use it. That's super important. But what is also important is, even before you get to that stage, in the first 90 days, talk to your customers, understand what they need, and let that inform the actual product that you're building. Very quickly, this book is an amazing book, and everyone should go and read it. If you've already read it, I see a couple of people have already read it. It talks specifically about usability testing, but it is, the ethos of this book is about doing user research quickly and often. And that, if you can instill that in your company, it is so important. Rule number 2 is size the market. So in the early days of a startup, there's lots of kind of what can I actually build? You know, I have all these different options on the table. What should I actually go and build? And what I would encourage you to do is just do a sanity check. Am I actually building something that is big enough? And what I mean by that is, let's say I wanted to build, I guess, products for people with gray carpet. Now, maybe there's not that many people with gray carpet out here. Maybe I sell to the Computer History Museum and that's it. And if the market you're going after isn't big enough and you're going to have to own like 20 or 50 or 80 or 100% of the market just to be able to build a great business, then that's problematic. It's much better to go after a big, big market where even if you get 1% of the market, that is still a very interesting business. And so I'm not saying build a full business plan or anything like that, but you know, when we were founding Chomp, these numbers are a little bit later than from when we were founding Chomp, but these are the sort of things that we looked at. And the thinking that we went through was, okay, there are all of these apps being downloaded. So of that, some percentage, you can make some model about how number of downloads converts to actual app revenue, like dollars that consumers are paying to download apps. And then from that, you can say, okay, so then some percentage of that developers will be willing to spend on advertising those apps. And then from that, you can sort of say, oh, and that's a pie that's about this big, and you know, if we got 1% of that pie, is that an interesting business? And it turns out that in the case of app advertising, it's an extremely interesting business. There's a lot of money being spent on app advertising. And so just do some back-of-the-envelope calculations before you really commit to an idea, because it just helps you really make sure you're investing all your energy in the right thing. Then a couple of technical things. So a lot of people talk about minimum viable product, right? I'm sure you guys have heard that today a lot. I want to talk about minimum viable process. Now, engineers, as a group, tend to be kind of messy. There are some exceptions. I hope I'm not offending anyone. But as a group, we tend to be kind of like fly by the seat of our pants, and we just get stuff done. And that's great in the early days of a startup, because you want to ship stuff really quickly. But it also can get you into trouble. And suddenly you're emailing code around, and you don't know you've lost some file, and you have to write it all over again, and it's bad. And so I would encourage you guys to really talk to your technical teams about putting in place some of this, what I call minimum viable process. And this is what I believe in the first 90 days is the minimum viable process. So the first is use version control. So version control is a system by which every line of code, you can kind of unwind it and like store history in different states. And what that lets you do is if for some reason you release a bug, you can say, oh, bother, I'm going to roll that back and go back to the previous version. Or I'm going to find out who committed that line of code that had the bug in it. Or any of these kinds of things. And it's incredibly important. If you only do one thing on this list, get your developers to use version control, because it's really astounding to me how many companies don't, in the early days, I mean. The second is set up commit emails. Commit emails is, there's very simple scripts out there. You can just do some Googling, that when a developer actually commits some code, it sends you an email. And it just says, hey, this person committed some code. It's incredibly useful as a communication tool to really understand what's going on. Don't track bugs in email. I am actually still guilty of this at times. Stephanie, my designer, who's in the audience, is also guilty of this at times. But when you have a bug, that bug could come back again sometime later. And so having a record of all the bugs and all the feature requests is really important. There are some really great tools. Pivotal Tracker is a really great tool. Lighthouse is a really great tool. Fogbugs. So please use one of those. And finally, set up a wiki for documentation. And here are some keywords of things you can go and Google for each of those things. And then finally, and I cannot stress this last point enough, know what's going on inside your system. If for some reason you have a catastrophic failure and your website or your app goes offline, you need to actually be able to understand how to diagnose the problem. And so again, this is something you can talk to your technical teams about if you're not technical yourself. This is a graph from a product called Munin. What it does is it graphs the response, the actual request time, so how long it takes to, say, load a web page over time. And this, as it turns out, is shockingly slow, so don't actually look at the axis, but look at the shape of the graph. So it really helps to be able to see that something went wrong there. And imagine also that you could have a little system that sends you an SMS when a big spike like this happens. Tools like Munin, Nagios, Cacti, you have to use them, and you have to use them before launch. This is not something where you can skimp on the, oh, we'll do it after launch, we'll do it after launch. Because if you get written up on TechCrunch and you have a big wave of traffic, these are the tools that are going to help your technical team or help you really understand what's going on. And then, really quickly, if you're not shipping in the first 90 days, and you're not some special startup that has some reason why you should not, you should ship in the first 90 days. It's really important to get that market validation and get the user feedback. So, really 5 simple rules. And I hope that they are helpful for you. I hope that you can go away and kind of put some of those into action straight away. Questions?
Woohoo! Thank you.